And if I told you that NASA has already discovered something so disturbing that it never had the courage to reveal it to the world, would you believe it? It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but what you discover now may surprise you.
Over there.
Decades among blurred images, classified files, and deafening silences. There is a pattern. Whenever a discovery seems to threaten the official narrative about space, it simply disappears. Missions are canceled, records become classified, and statements by former NASA scientists are treated as delirium. Coincidence, or part of a much bigger plan? Have you ever noticed how certain information simply disappears from the media? How come some documents never seem to reach the public, even when they should? There are secret files, undisclosed images, strange leaked recordings, and, most importantly, unanswered questions. Why did NASA never return to the moon? What happened to probes that disappeared without a trace? And most disturbing, why do former agency employees claim to have witnessed something non-human during space missions? In this video, we dive into the darkest behind the scenes of the world's most powerful space agency. And we're not talking about weak rumors. These are reports from credible people, visual evidence, and documents that narrowly escaped censorship. The term secret NASA programs may sound fanciful to some, but the more you investigate, the more you come across evidence that simply has no official explanation. Does this sound familiar to you? You ever felt like there's something wrong with this whole story? Stay with me until the end, because with every minute that passes, the mysteries will deepen, and maybe you'll start to see space in a completely different way. If you are interested in space conspiracy theories, curiosities that defy logic, and want to understand what is behind NASA's forbidden files, this video was made for you. What is about to be exposed here may not only change your opinion, but also leave you with more questions than answers. And that's exactly where it all starts. The truth is, the more we investigate, the clearer it becomes that there is a hidden layer behind what they show us. It's not just about science or space, it's about control, silence, and the pieces that don't fit into the official puzzle. And when we start to connect these dots, we realize that perhaps we are facing something much bigger than we were led to believe. What did NASA really discover out there? What was so scary that it had to be locked away in confidential files? There is no way to go through all this and continue to see the universe in the same way. And look, if this topic makes sense to you, if anything here gave you goosebumps or sparked a doubt that you never wanted to silence, leave here in the comments what touched you most. Share your vision, even if you are skeptical, because it is in this dialogue that everything comes to life. This channel is not just about revealing what is hidden. It is about building together a community that does not accept ready-made answers and continues to search beyond the obvious. Your like helps a lot, in truth. It shows the algorithm that this content matters, that it is worth delivering to more people who, like you, want to understand what is behind the curtains of space exploration. And if you haven't signed up yet, do so now, because this journey, it's just beginning, and what lies ahead may be even more shocking than you imagine. But back, because there's something in the next section that maybe connects all these pieces. While billions are invested by private companies and governments in the frantic race to colonize Mars, a question continues to echo behind the scenes in the scientific community and curious people around the world. What exactly is being omitted from humanity? Why, in the midst of so much technological advancement, are there still glaring gaps in what NASA discloses, or rather, in what it chooses not to disclose? This is not just a technical question. It's a question of mentality. A silent transformation is underway, where knowledge stops being a collective right and becomes a piece carefully controlled by those who decide what we should or shouldn't. In recent years, the release of leaked documents, the revelation of unauthorized audio recordings, and the emergence of former employees willing to speak out have provoked a change in official discourse. Still, there is a pattern. Whenever data is too sensitive, it is discredited, disproved, or simply disappears. It's no coincidence, it's strategy. Because when the truth has the power to shake structures, whether political, scientific, or even philosophical, it becomes too dangerous to be left free. And it is exactly at this point that space exploration stops being just about rockets and planets. She goes on to touch on profound themes, such as our future as a civilization, the trust we place in authorities, and the silent decisions that shape the collective destiny of humanity. Think about it. Why, with all the technology we have, do we still rely on pixelated images and edited videos of the surface of Mars? Why are strange structures captured in photographs so quickly dismissed as lens anomalies? And why are certain questions always ignored in interviews with astronauts? The answer may lie between the lines. It's not just about hiding a fact, but about controlling narratives, about protecting a pre-established order. Because admitting certain discoveries wouldn't just mean changing schoolbooks. It would mean rewriting our own origin, our limits, and, perhaps, even our role in the universe. The impact of this would not just be informative, it would be existential. This is where curiosity mixes with fear. Because as much as we want to know, there's also a part of us that wonders, are we ready to deal with this hidden truth? Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the more you look at the patterns of omission, the more you begin to understand that some decisions, those made away from the cameras, away from official press conferences, have an immensely greater weight than any space launch we've ever seen. The signs are there. But to see them, you need to change the angle. Step out of the comfortable narrative and look carefully behind the scenes of what they show us as science. Some experts in space, geopolitics have already pointed out that this race for Mars may not just be scientific. It could be an escape. An attempt to escape from something that has not yet been revealed to us. And that changes everything. Because we're not just talking about colonizing a distant red planet. We are talking about impactful decisions that could define the next centuries of humanity. And, in this scenario, hiding strategic information becomes more than a choice. It becomes a weapon. When you connect all of this to the silence surrounding certain discoveries, the puzzle begins to take shape. Missions that failed for no reason, probes that have lost contact, images that were published and, mysteriously, taken down. The pattern repeats itself. There is always an explanation, but it never fully convinces. And it is in this void between what they say and what they don't say that theories are born. Some absurd, yes, but many of them based on details that few dare to investigate. Comment there. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because when we start to look closely at the forgotten details, at the documents that were leaked and then disappeared, at the reports hushed up for decades, a pattern begins to emerge, and it's not comfortable at all. There are records, yes. Real documents, many of them confirmed by insiders, that mention unusual discoveries on missions to Venus, Mars, and even the Moon. But the question that remains unanswered is, why did this information never become public? What is so scary, so disturbing that needs to be hidden from humanity at any cost? In 1976, for example, NASA's Viking mission captured images of the surface of Mars that showed what appeared to be a symmetrical formation, similar to an artificial structure. This was reported, questioned, and then hushed up. The official explanation: optical illusion caused by shadows and relief. But years later, new images with better resolution showed that it was still there. And once again, silence reigned. What do these lineups really mean? Are they signs of an ancient civilization? Were they ruins? The mere possibility of this would be enough to shake the traditional view of human history, and perhaps completely change our perception of who we are and where we are going. And it's not just Mars. There are reports that point to strange evidence on missions to Venus, such as thermal variations and records of chemical compounds that should not be there. What did they find on that hellish planet, which seems to have once been much more like Earth than we imagined? There are scientists who defend the hypothesis that Venus could have harbored life forms billions of years ago. But this theory rarely gains prominence. Why? The Moon, our closest neighbor, also holds its own enigmas. During the Apollo missions, several astronauts reported hearing unexplained sounds while in lunar orbit. Sounds that do not fit with any known mechanical noise, and that were not even mentioned in official interviews, and in some radio recordings leaked years later. It is possible to hear what appear to be conversations abruptly interrupted, as if someone said more than they should have. Was there something there that was never reported? There are those who say yes, and that this something was filmed, cataloged and classified as top secret to this day. And when we connect these dots, the feeling is that the surface of reality is much thinner than it seems. Behind the shine of public images, there is another layer, dense, protected, selective, where critical decisions are made far from the eyes of the population. We're not just talking about science. We are talking about politics, power, and control. Because controlling the narrative about space is also controlling the idea of the future. If they admit that they found something they can't explain, how do they maintain authority? How to maintain the trust of the global population? And mainly, how can we maintain the belief system that we were taught since we were little? This journey inevitably leads us to deeper reflection. What if this is all real? What if we have been preparing slowly for decades for a revelation that never arrives? Maybe because it's not convenient. Perhaps because its social, religious, emotional, and psychological impact would be devastating. After all, how would humanity react if it knew it was not alone in the universe? Who has already found signs, traces, ruins, messages, but never had the courage to admit it? Are we really ready to face this hidden truth, the way NASA conducts? Its public communication seems meticulously calculated. Communications are filtered. Terms are carefully chosen. There is always a seems, a maybe, a we are investigating, but never a direct statement. Never a total surrender. There is a dance between what is shown and what is omitted, between what we are authorized to know and what must remain hidden. And it is in this shadow that the greatest mysteries of modern space exploration live. These secret reports, these strange images, these files that disappear or reappear mysteriously edited. They all point to something. Something that may, yes, be too scary to reveal all at once. Maybe that's why so many people have the feeling that something is being hidden. It's not paranoia. It's perception. It's the discomfort of knowing that the truth is there. It's very close, but still out of our reach. Write it in the comments. That makes sense to me? Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because as the dust of sensationalism settles, what remains are very real, very concrete pieces that point to something bigger than just coincidences or errors of interpretation. We are not talking about internet delusions or obscure forums with baseless theories. We are talking about cataloged documents, statements from former NASA scientists, files obtained through the Access to Information Act in the United States. There is a pattern of omission, and it has a name, a date, and, according to internal sources, it even has a code name, Project Eclipse, according to leaks that circulated. Between 2014 and 2018, the so-called Project Eclipse would be a confidential program parallel to official NASA projects, aimed at analyzing discoveries considered incompatible with current public understanding. This would include everything from unnatural geometric structures found on Mars to unidentified forms of energy emission detected by probes before they lost contact. None of this has been officially confirmed, of course. But when former engineers, Like Richard C. Hoagland, who worked in technical consulting for NASA projects, publicly state that there is much more to Mars than rocks and dust. We begin to see the edges of this hidden truth. And why does this matter? Because this information is not just curious. They carry the power to bring about a transformation in the way we understand our own existence. If the probes really detected artifacts or ruins on Martian soil, why have we never seen these images on mainstream television news? Why, when something anomalous appears, is the official response almost always the same? Shadow, image compression, equipment failure. It's as if there was an institutionalized mentality to avoid at all costs the idea that we are not alone, or worse, that we may not even be the first. Some of these reports speak of a specific pattern, structures with right angles, perfect alignments at symmetrical distances, circular shapes within natural craters. In any archaeological context, this would be treated as evidence of intelligent intervention, but in space, it is ignored, treated as an illusion, as pareidolia. The curious thing is that this selective behavior has been repeated for decades. Probes disappear without plausible technical explanation, like Beagle 2, which disappeared and was only found years later in an apparently functional condition as if it had been turned off. Others, like the Mars Observer, simply lost contact shortly before entering orbit. The official answer always points to mechanical failures. But the repetition of this pattern raises an inevitable question. What if these failures are controlled? What if what they captured was not meant to be transmitted? There are also insiders, people who worked in image, telecommunications, and logistics departments. One of them, identified only as K, leaked a few years ago screenshots of an internal control panel that supposedly contained a folder called Layer Delta 9. According to him, this folder contained images filtered before official publication. He was never able to prove the veracity of the content. The images were not independently verified. But the existence of the panel and the data segmentation protocols scribe clash with old NASA technical manuals that have been partially released to the public. Coincidence? In another case, a document leaked by FOIA Freedom of Information Act, dated 1991, shows correspondence between two directors of the astrobiology sector. The theme of the email: possible biological phenomena in inhospitable environments. Disclosure Containment Protocol. In it, there was an explicit instruction to avoid premature publications without analysis of social impact. Of course, the text is full of technical jargon, but the essence is clear. If you find something that affects the collective mentality too much, you should think twice, 3, 10 times before making it public. That's where the weight of silent decisions comes in, because truth, when it involves revelations that can transform our understanding of origin, presence, and purpose in the universe, is no longer just scientific data. It becomes a political, spiritual, and even philosophical dilemma. Whoever controls this information has something in their hands that transcends any rocket technology. They control the limit of what humanity can or cannot know about itself. And don't think this is something recent. In old interviews, astronauts like Edgar Mitchell already stated that we are not alone and that agencies have known this for a long time. Of course, these lines were minimized. He himself, for a long time, was portrayed as eccentric. But when you add up the reports from so many inside professionals, the disappearances of data, the disappearances of missions, the videos edited before being shown to the public, the idea that we are facing a concealment operation gains strength. Now, imagine the impact of all of this being revealed at once. The collapse of paradigms. The reconfiguration of what is real, what is possible, what is known. It's a difficult burden to absorb. Maybe that's why the information comes in doses, fragmented, disguised as anomalies, buried under layers of technical jargon and standardized explanations. Maybe they're not lying. Maybe they're just hiding. Comment there. That makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because when theories start to intersect with concrete evidence, the game changes completely. It stops being just speculation and becomes an invitation to investigation, a journey where what is at stake is not just our curiosity, but the way we interpret reality itself. And here comes a crucial detail: the evidence. Not those easily accessible by a simple Google search, but the fragments, the partially declassified files, the old records that contradict the most recent versions, the images with layers erased or deliberately obfuscated. With each comparison made between the raw material and what reaches the public, a disturbing pattern is confirmed. Something is being hidden. A clear example of this are the images captured by the Curiosity rover on Mars. In 2012, one of the photos released showed a silhouette that resembled a metallic object emerging from the ground. The image caused an uproar. But within a few hours, the original version was replaced by another, slightly resized and with more contrast, a detail that obfuscated precisely the suspicious area. NASA explained that this was an update to color calibration. But why change the image after it had already been published? Why did that specific point become less visible precisely after going viral? Another emblematic case involves the records of the Apollo 17 mission. During a live broadcast of the mission, one of the astronauts turns the camera to the lunar horizon and, for a few seconds, a triangular shape appears suspended in the background, motionless. The video, years later, was removed from the official collection with the justification of technical error in the recording. However, users had already downloaded and stored the original recording, which allowed comparisons between versions. The new recording available on NASA's official channel has a small cut exactly at the time the object appeared. The rest remains intact. Why? What kind of technical error acts so selectively? There are also internal documents that were partially released thanks to FOIA requests, and many of them contain intriguing expressions, such as unusual structural anomalies, non-terrestrial activity, or visual contact with uncatalogued phenomenon. However, these expressions are always accompanied by red stamps: top secret, limited distribution, restricted access to higher levels. In reports that deal with supposedly natural phenomena, why this level of secrecy? Why not allow the scientific community to investigate openly? And when we talk about sound evidence, things go even deeper. In 1969, during the Apollo 10 mission, astronauts reported hearing space music. While orbiting the far side of the Moon, an area where contact with Earth was momentarily interrupted. The audio, initially kept confidential, only became public in 2008 when excerpts of the transcript were leaked. In it, you can clearly hear the astronaut saying, "Do you hear that? It sounds like music, like a whistling sound, ... The official explanation was that it was interference between radios. But the frequency captured does not fit with any known signal, and the astronaut's tone of voice does not suggest that they face the episode normally. In fact, they seemed restless, disconcerted almost, as if they were trying to understand something they knew they shouldn't say out loud. These are just a few examples. There are hundreds of similar cases spread over decades across different missions, across different locations in the solar system. We are not talking about an isolated event or a rare coincidence. We are facing a systematic accumulation of data that has, for some reason, been distorted, hidden, or simply ignored. It's as if there were an automatic filtering mechanism capable of deciding what is acceptable for us to know and what is not. The impact of realizing this goes far beyond curiosity. It's a key shift in mentality. Because when we understand that there is concrete evidence being suppressed, we start to rethink everything. What do we call truth? Who has the right to tell the official story? Who decides what is serious science and what should be dismissed as fiction? And, above all, what are we missing by not having full access to the discoveries made in the name of humanity? This transformation in the way we see reality is inevitable for anyone who delves into this topic, and it is accompanied by an almost silent restlessness. Because if this evidence exists, and if it is carefully kept out of public view, it means we are being deprived of something that belongs to us, the truth, understanding the universe. And, who knows, the reunion was something that was part of our journey much longer than we can imagine. Write it in the comments. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because even though all these signs point to something carefully veiled, it is essential to also observe how official bodies position themselves in the face of these suspicions. NASA, for example, has always maintained a rational stance based on scientific objectivity. And this, at first glance, is expected from an agency that represents the pinnacle of engineering and astronomical knowledge. However, this same objectivity, in many cases, is accompanied by a coldness that easily slips into the field of systematic denial. Every time an image generates controversy, an audio leak, or a former employee comes forward with information that is out of control, the response is usually full of technical terms that, although they sound sophisticated, almost never explain what really matters. Atmospheric refraction, electromagnetic interference, image compression error. Terms like this are used to dismantle any attempt at questioning. But anyone who looks carefully realizes that these explanations, despite seeming plausible, are almost never accompanied by complete data. They do not show the behind-the-scenes analysis, nor the real technical contexts. They simply impose themselves as unquestionable truths. And that, in itself, should be a reason for reflection. If nothing was being hidden, why would the number of documents classified as ultra-secretos still growing year after year, even in times of supposed transparency? Why are old space projects still under secrecy, even after decades? In 2024, example, the U.S. government declassified only part of a 1969 report on unidentified flying objects. But the rest, precisely the most sensitive sections, continued to be blocked for national security reasons. What kind of security could be at risk by releasing records that are more than 50 years old? And when allegations arise, the reaction is almost always the same: discrediting the source. Witnesses are exposed, their sanity questioned, their intentions thrown into doubt. Often, these people are highly qualified professionals with solid careers and proven performance in real missions. But all they need to do is say something outside the official line to be marginalized, labeled as conspiracists or lunatics. There is a deliberate effort to keep dissenting voices on the sidelines, as if any alternative view is automatically a threat. The most curious thing is that this same agency that disqualifies unscientific theories and reports also maintains contracts with military companies, collaborations with intelligence agencies, and extremely strict confidentiality protocols with its employees. Doesn't it seem a little contradictory? The objective is open science. Why are there so many agreements with structures whose specialty is precisely the control of information? This behavior generates a growing fracture between public discourse and collective perception, and this is reflected in increased distrust among the population. It is no surprise that, in recent years, interest in investigative content about space has grown so much, people feel like they're not getting everything, that there is something beyond press conferences, beyond edited images, beyond cold press releases. It's as if collective intuition is sensing that the surface of the story is incomplete. And this feeling of gap, of absence of authentic answers, is what fuels the emergence of new questions. Because silence, in many cases, is more deafening than any truth spoken. There is also an emotional factor in this debate. The way in which the mystery is treated by institutions affects not only reasoning, but the sense of belonging. when someone feels that they are being treated as incapable of dealing with reality, indignation grows. It's not just about wanting to know, it's about wanting to be respected and denying access to legitimate information which could help us expand our consciousness. Is a way of underestimating human beings' ability to deal with their own transformation. And this is where the silent outrage begins to form. It's not explicit anger. It's that constant discomfort which arises whenever a question remains unanswered. Every time a new piece of data emerges, only to be quickly drowned out. Whenever an expert tries to touch on sensitive subjects and ends up disappearing from the debate. We are not talking about theories fabricated for entertainment purposes. We are talking about a real tension between what we are told and what we decide to question. It is at this point that the journey stops being just about space and becomes about mindset, about the decisions we make when faced with doubt. Do we accept the ready version, or do we investigate on our own? What drives us to continue is precisely the desire to leave the imposed script, not accepting that definitive answers are given so easily, especially when so many signs point to something still hidden. Comment there. That makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because everything that until now seemed like a sequence of anomalies, muffled noises, and classified documents begins to take on a new shape. When we come across what is perhaps the most disturbing revelation of all, we're no longer just talking about edited images or missions that end prematurely. What comes to light here touches on a sensitive point in our history, the concrete possibility that NASA, at some point, captured signs of alien intelligence, and that this information was purposely suppressed from public consciousness. The source of this allegation is not just anyone. This is a former technical consultant in the agency's astrobiology division, identified only by the initials RC, whose testimony was recorded in 2019 and delivered to an independent group of researchers with a history of working in government data leaks. In the report, he describes a transmission picked up by an experimental probe during an automated scan in the vicinity of Jupiter's moon Europa. According to him, the frequency of the emission did not correspond to any known pulsar pattern, solar activity, or artificial interference. On the contrary, there was rhythm, there was repetition, there was structure. But the most shocking thing came later. Further analysis of the signal revealed a highly organized binary mathematical sequence. Nothing natural, nothing random. And it was exactly at that moment that, according to the informant, the mission entered a state of risk interference, triggering the Omega-12 protocol, an internal procedure reserved only for situations considered critical to global security. The material previously accessible to the mission's scientific team was immediately relocated to a military encryption unit. Overnight, all research was sealed under defense jurisdiction. And the signal. It was never mentioned again in public reports. This information, of course, was never officially confirmed. But the curious thing is that after this event, the responsible probe project, which until then was considered promising and widely publicized, was discreetly closed. The official allegation was budget cuts. However, previously released data on mission expenses contradict this justification. And the most intriguing thing, the main scientists involved in the project were reassigned to completely different areas, many of them leaving the agency a few months later. Without giving interviews or participating in any new public program, the inevitable question that arises is why such a drastic reaction? What was captured there, in the cold vastness around Europa, that could cause such an impact to justify absolute silence? The account of RC coincides with other smaller leaks over the years, where supposed sound recordings of unnatural signals were covered up with generic labels like cosmic noise. In some forums by former aerospace industry employees, there are similar reports, always full of gaps. Always with that dense layer of unofficial censorship, the one that doesn't come via email or memo. But that is imposed by fear. And if this is all real, if NASA really captured a signal of intelligent origin outside Earth, the decision to hide this data becomes a gigantic ethical issue. Who has the right to control this type of discovery? Who decides what is safe for the population to know? Revelations like this don't just belong to governments or agencies. They belong to humanity because they change everything. They change our perspective, our history, our spirituality, our vision of the future. The simple idea that we are not alone, or worse, that we never have been, is strong enough to provoke an irreversible transformation in the collective consciousness. And perhaps that is exactly the fear. Not the fear of contact itself, but the fear of the collapse of the dominant narrative, because admitting that there is something or someone out there watching us, perhaps interacting, perhaps waiting, is opening a door that can never be closed. It's recognizing that all the maps we've used up until now have been incomplete, that all decisions based on absolute certainty need to be reviewed, and that, after all, we are just part of something much bigger, much older, and much more complex than we were taught to imagine. This revelation, or rather, this well-founded suspicion, pushes us to a crossroads between the comfort of ignorance and the restlessness of the search. And whoever chooses to continue searching, sooner or later, comes across a truth that is not ready. It comes in pieces, in fragments of files, in silences that are too long, in eyes that avoid questions. And precisely for this reason, it requires more than faith, it requires courage. The courage to look up and accept that perhaps we are not the protagonists of the story. Just a part of it took a comment there. That makes sense to me. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject. Because after everything that has been revealed so far, the altered images, the muffled audio, the signals captured and silently archived, an inevitable question continues to echo. If all this is true, why hide it? What is the limit between protecting the population and manipulating the collective conscience? Is there really a risk so great that it justifies decades of institutional silence? Or is the real risk that we wake up to something that can no longer be undone? At this point, perhaps the biggest revelation isn't about aliens, structures on Mars, or mysterious signals. Maybe it's about how we decide to deal with the truth. What is at stake is not just the existence of another form of life. It's the way it would transform everything. Science, religion, culture, political systems. Every structure of modern society has been built on the idea that we are alone. Or at least, that we are the only conscious ones in an indifferent universe. But if this foundation shakes, if it is shaken by irrefutable evidence, everything we know needs to be rethought. And here comes a point that almost no one discusses: the psychological impact of this revelation. What would happen to millions of people's sense of purpose? How would institutions react to a narrative that they do not control? Is the silence, however revolting it may seem, an attempt to avoid a collective collapse? Or is it, in fact, the perfect strategy to keep power in the hands of a few, while the majority live in a cycle of distraction and disbelief? Because, let's be honest, even when evidence emerges, even when documents are released with words like non-terrestrial contact or signs of unknown origin, a large part of the population simply ignores it. And this is not for lack of intelligence. It's because of excess conditioning. We have been trained to discredit the improbable, to laugh at the impossible, to call anything that threatens our sense of normality crazy. And this is perhaps the greatest asset of those who hide the truth, knowing that, even when faced with the light, many will still prefer the shadows. But there is another side to all this. Because, at the same time that the fear of revelation paralyzes, there is also a spark of hope that begins to spread. A growing desire to understand more, to question more, to seek out on our own what we are not being told. This journey, which begins as curiosity, becomes awareness. And when consciousness expands, there is no turning back. The truth can be uncomfortable, but it is what moves us forward. It is what frees us from passivity and confronts us with our real capacity to understand the universe, not as spectators, but as part of it. The silence from NASA, from governments, from institutions can be deafening. But every question you ask, every doubt you share, is a noise in this system of silence. It's a sign that something is changing. And this change does not happen in secret offices or control centers. It happens here, now. In the minds of those who dare to think differently, comment there. I'm on this journey too. If you've made it this far, it's because something in this content really touched you. Whether it's a question that finally made sense, an unexpected connection, or just that strange feeling that there's a lot more going on than we're being told. And if this type of conversation makes sense to you, consider subscribing here to the channel. The idea is precisely this: to open space to question, investigate, and reflect together on everything that remains between the lines of official history.o. And if you stayed until the end, leave the sentence in the comments. I'm with you. Until the end, this way I will know that you are part of this journey until the last seconds. Your like also helps a lot, not only so that the video reaches more people, but to show that this type of content still has space amidst so much superficial noise out there. And if you want to continue along this line of thought, there's a video here that complements exactly this topic. Click and stay with me there. The next piece of that puzzle could be there.